You're listening to Halftime with your host, Mylan Bittenbender, where each week we take a few minutes to step off the field of life and discuss the challenges and joys of navigating life in the middle years. I hope your time with us today will help you develop your strategy for a winning second half. Welcome to the locker room. You're among friends. Hey there, thanks for joining us on Halftime today. In this episode, I interview Randy Gravitt. Randy and his business partner, Mark, run an organization called Lead Every Day. It's a leadership development organization out of the Atlanta area. And Randy just wrote a book recently called Winning Begins at Home. I love the concept of the book. Basically, helps leaders to understand that if they want to win in life, it really begins at home with family, being a husband, being a father, taking care of leadership at home first. I highly recommend the book. I hope that you'll run out and grab it. And there's a link for the book in the show notes. But we talk about the book today. We also talk about marriage in midlife and some of the challenges that we face with the changes that come in midlife. So I hope that this episode will be a blessing to you. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with Randy Gravitt. Good afternoon, Randy. Thank you so much for joining us on Halftime today.
Thanks, Mylan. I'm glad to be here. Grateful to hang out with you for a little while.
Yeah. I was given your name, of course, by Dan Webster, good common friend, and so thankful for him. And I noticed actually he was in the acknowledgments in your book, which we're going to be talking about here today. And so I know that he's made a big impression on you and been big in your life as well. Where am I talking to you from today?
I'm near Atlanta.
Okay.
I'm a good old Southern boy.
Yeah.
down in Georgia.
Yeah.
Not too far from Atlanta, so close to the airport, which is good.
Okay.
But born and raised here, a couple of stops in Texas and Tennessee, but been back in Georgia for I guess going on almost 30 years now. So
all right.
Yeah.
And we can tell from your voice, you're a Southern boy.
The accent will give me away for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say, I like your part of the country. I get up and see Dan occasionally, and beautiful up in Holland and in the area where you are up in Michigan. So it's a good part of the country.
It's beautiful, especially for about 6 months of the year.
Exactly. I was about to say, I'm sure you're enjoying the summer right now. Yeah. So the weather was okay.
Yeah. So thanks again for being willing to kind of share with us today. And I'm always excited to have somebody on who's written a book, not just any book, but a good book. I have the opportunity to kind of unpack that because I love the idea that we can have a conversation about it. But then people can follow up that conversation by going and getting the book and actually being able to enjoy and really benefit from the wisdom that you've put in your book. Winning Begins at Home. And I've actually referred to in a couple of my episodes the need to have an episode about marriage because we do know that as with almost every area of life in midlife, there are changes happening and there are things impacting us and our relationships. And so we're really going to get into that. We're going to unpack the book. But I always like to start by giving our audience a little bit of time to get to know my guest. And so I wonder if you'd just take a few minutes to kind of share just a little bit about maybe your youth, maybe a little nostalgia. Now, I don't know how old you are. When would you have graduated from high school?
It's been a while, several decades. I'll be 60 this year. So okay. I've been around for a while, but yeah, it's hard to remember back that far almost. But yeah, I mentioned in Georgia, I was in a little small town in Northwest Georgia, grew up there. My dad worked with Georgia Power. He was a utility guy. And my mom worked in the school system. So just pretty basic childhood, middle-class family. And it was fun growing up. Brother and sister were playing ball all the time. Seemed like we're always at a ballpark or, hanging out. But lots of family dinners and grandparents, on the weekends. I think my parents were just trying to get rid of us on the weekends, but we hung out with them and yeah, it was just a different time. Our culture was different, obviously, at that time. Technology was not nearly what it is today. And values were much more talked about, it feels like in some ways. And just small town kid. I saw a T-shirt the other day that said, my small town is smaller than your small town. I'm not sure that's true. I think my small town may be the smallest. It's a little hole in the road, you know, and so it's great growing up there. You really couldn't get away with anything. Somebody else's dad would knock you back in line if you did. So yeah, it was just a different time, but I'm grateful for those roots and those values. And my mom's still around. My dad passed away a few years ago, but my mom's still around, and she's doing great, and you know, trying to do what I was taught as a kid, honestly.
Yeah. Well, those are always usually, I shouldn't say always. For some of us, those are really fond memories. You mentioned in the book that your dad taught you how to bunt. Maybe that'll come up later on in our conversation. But it sounds like you got a lot from your parents, and were able to grow up in a.
Yeah, I tell people all the time it was not perfect. I mean, there are no perfect families, and we were probably, as somebody said recently, we put the fun and dysfunction on. That's probably true. We had a pretty good time, but we were, every family's a mess in some ways, and and yet I think if we get it right, it can be a lot of fun, and it can be the joy of our life. But if we get it wrong, a lot of regret, and it can be really hard. We know that we all have been in times with family where we know it was really good, and no matter who's listening, there are times when family can be the hardest places. But I think when we get it right, it makes it better. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we definitely were not created to live alone. And so it's good when we can have a good family situation. Now you talked about values and the things that you remember from your childhood. You must have graduated early 84, something like that. 83. Okay.
So yeah. So and then it was it was right there in the 80s. It was a lot of fun. I heard today, of course it wasn't out at the time, but I heard just today that Back to the Future, the movie, was what was it, 35 years ago that came out. So that was even after I was before that. So
yeah,
most people don't even know what it is, and it's like that's how long I've been around. So it's good.
Well, and actually, one of the sequels, we've already passed that time frame. We don't have flying cars yet, but
we're going back to the future. We're already past where they went to in the future. So
we are in the future.
Past. I don't know. We're past the future. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Yep. Any other 80s icons? And I bring this up because for a lot of our listeners, I actually talked to one of my listeners the other day who was saying, "Oh, I love that part where you just talk about some 80s stuff, some iconic stuff from, just the nostalgia of what we remember." Anything unique or interesting that you remember from the early 80s that would have been very iconic to that time?
Yeah, I mean, the music was obviously crazy. The big hair, and the stuff we wore was just wild. I say we wore in my little town, and the fashion trends didn't get there. We were just blue jeans and a t-shirt, about all we had. But I think about stuff even before that, 70s and growing up. You talk about nostalgia. Andy Griffith, we watched the Andy Griffith show, and the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island and Happy Days and all these little syndicated shows, that were from back in the day. So some of your listeners will remember those, but most of them probably are not quite maybe haven't been as around as long as I have. So it's good, man. We're it's a fun time now when you see all the stuff that's changed. But you just never could imagine. I even told my wife, you were talking about graduation. I told my wife a few weeks ago when graduations were happening this spring. I asked her, I said, "Do you remember when you graduated from high school?" And she's like, "Yeah, but it's been a while." And I said, could you have imagined if you were standing in line? I want you to think about standing in that line, getting ready to go in, to the ceremony. I don't know why I pictured that. I just had this flashback to that. And I said, if somebody had told you that day that you were going to spend a good part of your life with a screen in your hand, with the power of the internet. There was no internet, but there were no computers. There probably were computers. They didn't have any in my town. So it's just, you really couldn't have fathomed, speaking of the Back to the Future thing, you really couldn't have fathomed the effect that technology would have.
Oh yeah.
and yet here we are, so it's been, we kind of lived through a lot of stuff. It's been fun to see
Yeah.
the development of a lot of that.
Yeah, somebody was talking about Back to the Future the other day, and I don't know if you remember in the one, I can't remember which one it was, but they were looking at the phone, and he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's supposed to start raining in about 30 seconds." And when you watch that 30 years ago, you're like, "Yeah, right. There's no way they could."
Yeah.
And it happens, all the time.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
So I'm doing this new thing. Actually, I'm going to try it with you today. We'll see how this goes. But just to kind of get to know our guests a little bit better, we're calling it the lightning round, and I'm going to ask you some quick questions, and you can just tell us cats or dogs.
Dogs.
Favorite city to visit?
Venice, pretty good.
Venice, Florida, or Venice, Italy?
Venice, Italy.
Italy. Have you been
Yeah,
there?
I have. Yeah,
Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess you would have had to be there to say that was your favorite city to go to.
it's one of my favorites. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's pretty fun.
Chick-fil-A or McDonald's?
Chick-fil-A all the way for me. Yeah.
If you live in Georgia, you better say that, right?
Yeah, and we do a lot of work with Chick-fil-A. Actually,
Oh.
my business, I guess I've done over 200 events for them over the last decade, developing and training their leaders and stuff. And so, I kind of am, but it's a no brainer for me. I mean, it's not, no comparison. They're the best.
Not even close. Not even close.
Not even close.
All right. Favorite sport to watch?
I like to watch football, probably the best.
Okay. Favorite sport to play?
I'm a golfer.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Okay. Biden or Trump? No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to make you go there. You were like, whoa, no.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. So, yeah, like we've kind of touched on a little bit here. This show is about midlife. One of the things I like to do is encourage our guests to kind of share a little bit about their own midlife experience, if they can, and maybe just kind of, one of the things that I've found is that we're part of the problem with the whole midlife thing is we're not talking about it. We'll make a joke about the midlife crisis or something like that, but we're not sitting down and really talking about the challenges of midlife. Some of them might even be the whole Gen X thing. Most midlifers are Gen X right now, or just coming out of that. And Gen X is the forgotten generation. But for whatever reasons, when a guest shares their story, a lot of our people go, okay, so my life isn't so crazy, or they connect with that really well. When I say midlife, what comes to mind for you? What was your, and at almost 60, we say midlife is anywhere 40 to 60. Everybody's kind of transition phase is a little bit different. I mean, as early as 35 nowadays. I don't know what that means for you, but what kind of comes to mind for you?
Yeah, well, I think, but I mean, this topic is fascinating to me. I'm probably as locked in on this maybe as anybody when I think about it. And I say that because how long, 15, 20 years ago, I was at a point where I felt, I guess I would use the word stuck. I'd gotten to a point, I'd been doing the same thing for nearly 20 years. I'd spent a decade coaching and teaching early on, and then spent about 20 years working in a nonprofit. And I was at a point in my life, I was going to be 50 at the time. This was probably, actually even before that though, early to mid 40s. I was just feeling like there's got to be more. I'm like, something's off here. And so I did what any smart person would do. I called Dan. And I said, hey man, I need to come and meet with you. And so I did, and we did a life plan. One of the things he does is he does a lot of leader development, and I just knew I needed a wiser, older person. Dan, actually even a little older than I am. And I thought I'd known him for a while. I'm going to call him and go spend a couple of days with him. And he was so generous and helped me out and really helped me navigate through just a time in my life where I was not really sure what my future was going to look like, and I knew there just had to be more. And so, anyway, long story short, he and I ended up writing a couple of books through that process. We wrote Finding Your Way, which was, in some ways, it was a book. It's a book for younger people, really, to help them understand what they're born to do. But we had written that, and then on the back side of that, there was a sequel we wrote called Unstuck, and that was really, in some ways, that was the place where I was. I found myself I felt like I knew all the answers to the test at work. It's easy to find yourself just going through the motions. And you talk about midlife, the middle of anything. This phrase, the mundane middle, just kind of came to me. I was thinking about that a lot, and nobody signs up for the middle. No, I mean, we don't like middle. We like beginnings and we like endings. We love the beginning. At first day of school, everybody's fired up. The first day of baseball season, everybody's undefeated. Everybody's all excited. Last day of school, that's another good day. End of a sermon, end of a whatever. I mean, it's like the endings, graduations, those are fun. But all those middle days, we're like, it just feels like the drudgery of it. And yet all the legacies that I know of were built in the mundane middle. They were people who were struggling in the middle and just kept showing up and grinding away. And they had practices and things in their life to help them do that. And so that became a catalytic time for me. I realized through that process that my long-term work contribution was going to be different. And so it took me about 4 or 5 years. And I mean, I was literally suffering. I was like, oh my gosh, I had a great job. And again, it was great, but I just knew there was something else. And so until I got that solved, it was really hard I felt like I was having to manufacture my energy, and I'm a high energy person.
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving about 11 years ago now, 10 and a half years ago. And I started my own company, actually working with leaders. I was just going to try to go and do it on my own. Like, can I speak and write and coach and help people? And Dan was encouraging me, and we'd written the first book, and I thought, maybe I could help a few people. And I had a little 6-month probably runway that it would work. But, I jumped out, Mylan, and the next thing you know, it just took off. And so now, decade plus later, about 20 people, and I've got a company. I mean, it's just like, I don't know how this even happened, but it was the courage to do that, to make that change that really led to where I am now. And so really, when I think about midlife, I just think about that mundane middle and how you just continue to struggle through those days when you don't want to, but at some point you have to make a decision. You're going to either live with courage or not. And real quickly, I'll tell you what my speech I gave myself was. I'm going to be an old man someday, and here I am now. I'm going to be an old man someday, and I'm going to, if I don't give this a shot, I'm going to be disappointed in myself that I didn't try, and I'm probably going to have some regret.
Yeah.
But if I give it a shot and I can't pull it off, I'll be disappointed that I don't have what it takes to pull it off, but I won't have regret. And again, this was my speech to myself. I can live with disappointment. I don't want to live with regret. And that literally was it. And when I finally got to that place, I was able to, show the courage to do what I needed to do, and the rest, they say, is history. So,
well,
I'm passionate about trying to help encourage people here when they get into this place where they do feel stuck.
Well, that really speaks to me, Randy. That's a lot of where I'm at. I've been real vulnerable, I guess, with my listeners that I kind of started. I'm a little bit late, I guess. I'm 54 right now, and probably a couple of years ago, went through a work transition, a career transition, and that kind of set off my midlife difficult midlife time. And man, I've been struggling the last couple of years. And to hear you say it took you about 4 or 5 years to get through that, but you kind of put your foot down and you decided to step into courage, and that kind of thing is really, really inspiring. And so thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to make sure I put the link to those books in the show notes, so that people
Yeah,
can
that's
find
great.
those as well. Maybe we'll have to have you back for another episode to talk about some of those things. I had planned to talk to you today about marriage and family, because I think that's another area where we find this midlife mundanity or malaise or whatever. We kind of get into this space, and it seems to be. And so, with you, you mentioned coaching. I know that you've worked with hundreds, maybe thousands of people over the years. And I'm sure you've worked with them in a professional sense, and whether you've worked with them in a personal sense, or at least just seen what's happening with them personally. I know that you've probably seen some of that midlife malaise in marriage. What are some of the things that you're seeing in that? Maybe trends or things that are consistent, that you see happening in marriages and families through that midlife stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, well, let me just start with, I think marriage has in some ways been diminished by our culture and by our society. It just doesn't feel like it's valued as much as it was once, upon a time. When I was a kid, I mean, it was just, families were it feels like, I mean, they were more committed to being together at that point. And now I mean, there's all kind of different, the families just look differently today. I'll say it that way. But I will say, for those who are married, who are listening, especially if you've been married as long as I have, we're let's see, 30, I should know this, 37 years. We just celebrated a couple of weeks ago. And I can just tell you, if you're with somebody for 4 decades or 4 months, it doesn't really matter. The bottom line is it's not going to be easy. It's going to be, there's going to be a lot of hard days, a lot of good days. I mean, there's nothing better when it works. It's just as good as it can be. And when it doesn't work, it can be really hard. And there are no perfect marriages, because there are no perfect people. I think what happens when we're in a marriage, though, it is a classroom to learn how to sacrifice, I would say. I mean, it's a place where you're going to have opportunity after opportunity to practice, to demonstrate humility, to demonstrate grace, forgiveness, humility. Again, I say that twice. I mean, you're going to get to say you're sorry a lot. You're going to get to help each other out. I mean, it's just, and then you throw kids into the mix. There are people who are listening who probably have kids as well, and it just makes it even. You get a master's degree in sacrifice if you have kids, and so it's really hard.
Yeah.
But I think when I look back on it, it's those values that we had to start with that have helped us. We are so different. Laura and I are so different. I mean, literally night and day different, but our values are the same. And we knew that going in, and that's kept us anchored, almost tethered together when it comes to that. And, we've had some principles we've lived by. One of the things we said, we never wanted to go to bed angry. And so I think when you try to live by that, and there have been times we've had to, kind of table a conversation at a certain time and say, we're going to have to pick this back up and discuss it more. But typically we're able to resolve stuff before, we would go to bed. And I said this very early on. I don't know. I mean, this is pretty simple, but if you're never angry when you go to bed, it's really hard to be angry 2 days in a row. And I think what happens is, if we don't deal with stuff and then we let that go day after day, and the next thing you know, we move, if we're not careful, from a season. There are seasons where things are hard. Like, we got our kids now are grown up, and they've all got their own little kids, and they've got little kids. Like, we have 8 grandkids that are 3 and under. So there's little tiny babies everywhere. And those are seasons where it's exhausting, and it's physically exhausting if you're a young parent listening. Mm-hmm. If you're a parent of a teenager, a lot of your audience probably listening, you have teenagers or kids that are about to graduate or have graduated. It's emotionally exhausting when they're that old, but when they're babies, it's physically exhausting. So these seasons are different, but if we're not careful, I think seasons can become patterns, and so if we don't keep a clean slate every day and we just let this little season begin to fester, the next thing you know, we have this pattern of dysfunction, and now it becomes really hard. And so many people, when things get hard, they just part ways. And so I'm, you know, I mean, people have to decide what they need to do, but I think I hear people say sometimes, well, we never really loved each other. That's really not true. I mean, you don't marry somebody that you never loved. I mean, people say that to justify whatever, but I think sometimes we just don't want to do the work of going back and working it out, and we'd rather be right than get it right, and those kind of things. And so I'm, you know, it's hard. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I think it's worth the effort that we put in, and you know, everybody will have to decide, you know, for themselves. But I think marriage can be a really great place if we'll focus on it. But those values to me that's a great starting point.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I think we see in culture right now, because of what you just shared, young people are seeing it's hard. Marriage is not easy. And in a lot of ways, they're like going, life's too complicated already. Why even try? And so they don't get married. Or people that have been married, it's easy to just give up. Why would you say it's worth getting married? Why would you say it's worth doing what it takes to work through those things? What have you found personally?
Yeah, well, for me, I think, well, I would go all the way back. I'm actually a person of faith, and I read the Bible, and one of the things that it talks about in the Bible is it's just not good for us to be alone. And I mean, not in marriage, but that's the context of that verse where it talks about it. And I think our lives are built to be together. We work with executives everywhere, and you know, all these leadership events we do and all that. And I'll hear people say sometimes it's lonely at the top. And I think it's only lonely at the top if you go to the top by yourself. I think if the goal is not just to get to the top, the goal is to get to the top together. For a company, for an owner, somebody who's leading a business, I think in the same way, our lives are better together. I just think we're built to be in community. We're created to be in community, and if we're not careful, we can math that or try to shortcut that with technology. It can become our pseudo community if we're not careful. And I understand people have online communities, and that's, I mean, you and I are connecting today through technology. So I'm not against technology. I think it's great. But if I'm not careful, I'll be scrolling on a screen all day, and I won't be face to face with anybody, and I won't have a conversation with anybody. And I think it's really easy these days to get caught up in that. And the statistics are very clear. I even heard this week that the Surgeon General has warned about social media. It's just like, this is a pandemic. I mean, to me, this is really a bad deal, and it is distorting our view of what relationships should be. And so to me, it's a big challenge and a big topic that we ought to talk about more. But yeah, to me, I didn't want to be by myself. I just thought and by the way, you got people listening who are introverts. I'm a high functioning introvert myself. I'm actually an introvert, but I mean, I'm pretty good in public, but spend most of my time there. But I'm just as good on my back porch by myself as I'm happy there. But I don't need to be there by myself all the time. I need to be in community, and I need to be in a relationship. I think we're all born that way. And there's just nothing better than being able to help somebody else or have somebody to help you. And so to me, I grew up, that was modeled. You know, my parents and grandparents, both sides were all married 50 plus years. And again, none of those families were perfect, but they were like together. And to me, I just thought, okay, that's what I want. And again, people will have to decide, but I think the statistics will show and the studies will show that we're going to live longer if we have those kind of relationships. We're going to even be more successful. So there's some crazy studies out there. If you look at it, if you have a healthy marriage, it really can be one of the most beneficial things you can do for your career and your life and all that. So it made sense to me, and I thought, you know, this is what we're going to do. And you know, when we made that commitment, I tell people all the time, if my wife ever leaves me, I'm going with her. I mean, it's like, I'm with her at this point. So it's, there's no, we're not going to go in any other direction. I mean, to me, it's the best way to go.
Now
It's hard, but
I got to ask you, did you get that from Tim Hawkins or did he get that from you?
I have no idea.
Do you know Tim Hawkins?
Not sure. I know who Tim Hawkins is. I don't know Tim, but I know who he is. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, he says that, and that one really got me when he said, "Yeah, if my wife ever leaves me, I'm going with her."
Yeah,
and that's how I feel too.
I've been saying that for 30 years, so
she's pretty stuck
exactly.
with me.
I mean, that's good.
So you wrote this book, and I was so glad to be able to get it. I downloaded the book, the audio version, and fortunately, it's the kind of book. It's not a textbook. It's actually great in the audio version because you can just listen to it like a story, and it can just kind of. I kind of soaked in it, and it was really good. Your book is about the hero's name is John, right? John is an everyday kind of a guy, just a normal guy. Who's a pretty nice guy and has a decent life and a decent family, but the marriage is a little bit in trouble, and it's a little shaky and may not be good for long if something doesn't change. Fortunately, he runs into the guide, Willie, and the book goes along this path, this journey of John and Willie coaching John to really view his marriage a little bit differently. I think one of the reasons we struggle in marriage so much is because if we don't have a clear vision and we don't feel like we understand what to do with this thing, it becomes much more difficult from just an emotional standpoint to really lean in and continue to press in and pursue that. So I'm always thankful for resources like this that can just refresh our vision and give us that boost to say, no, this is a beautiful thing, and yes, I am going to press in. So let me ask you this: what prompted you? Like, you do leadership development. What prompted you to write this book instead of another book on leadership or hiring teams or scaling your business or something like that?
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of stuff. I mentioned a minute ago for Chick-fil-A, we've done a lot of stuff for them and other companies, sports organizations, schools, universities, businesses. I mean, all kind of stuff. And we've written on culture and engagement and execution and leadership and talent and all that. So we teach these workshops for these companies, and it's great. But I kept talking to leader after leader saying things are what you're saying here resonates, it works, our businesses are more profitable, our people are more aligned, and yet there's still something missing. And we start having those conversations. What we discovered was people were winning from 9 to 5, but I guess there is no 9 to 5 anymore, but the old proverbial 9 to 5. Yeah. I started thinking, what would it mean to help people win from 5 to 9 for outside of work? And I think if we could help people outside of work, it actually would help them be better at work. And we found that over and over again. And so the phrase that I came up with based on these conversations with all these executives was, if you win at work and you lose at home, I think you still lose. I don't think the goal is to build a great company or a great team or to win a championship and forfeit the things maybe that matter most. And so I thought, okay, well, rather than creating more content, which we're doing all the time for these companies, let's pause and let's do something for people outside of work. And so we created, the book here, Winning Begins at Home. It's you mentioned it's a leadership parable. It's a easy story to read, but my favorite part really maybe the 70-page activation guide in the back of it. I mean, that to me is the part that it gives people a blueprint to help them build the family that they want. And I think it's easy to misunderstand that we actually have an opportunity to build a family. It's families. I always say families that last aren't built fast, but they are built. Yeah. And if we're not careful, we will just think, I don't know what to do, and so I'll just go back to work. I mean, so many people tell me over and over, it's like, I'm not real comfortable at home. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to build my family. I try and they don't respond. So what do I do? And I just go back to work because I'm comfortable there. I get a promotion there. I get paid there. I get, I've got a title there, and I've got training there and all that stuff. There's hoops to jump through, so to speak. Well, at home, I'm not sure what to do. And so we thought, okay, let's let's create a blueprint to help people have some fundamentals at home as well. And so, yeah, it's resonated with business leaders everywhere. I think people understand. A lot of people even buying it for their employees, knowing that I want to help them as well. I mean, I've heard people say before, we tell our people to check their heart at the door. Well, I hope that works out for you, because people are, their mom got a diagnosis or their kid has homework and they had a big blow up on the way to school. And I mean, they can't just leave home at home, but when they come to work, they still have that in their heart. And so if we can help them have better homes, I think they're going to be better employees. And so that's really what we were trying to do, is trying, because I really believe, Mylan, that everybody, if everybody who's in a great family, I think they'd really benefit from that. And the people who are not in a great family, they all tell me, I wish I was in a great family. And so I think there's just such a benefit if we can build better families. You were asking a minute ago about Biden and Trump. I don't care which way you vote. I'm not sure the government's going to solve our issues these days. And education is great. I love teachers. I was a teacher. I know some great teachers, but they're telling me education's really hard and it's not going to solve everything. I think business people, though, who understand, and I think families, when families get it right, it can make communities better, and it can make businesses better and organizations better, and things can get better. And so, we're passionate about trying to help. Again, in the workplace, everybody needs to have a good leader. I think everybody ought to be a part of a great family as well, if we can. So let's do our part to help with that.
Yeah, and I got to ask the question, can you really be a great leader if you're not really serving the whole person? I mean, I believe that leaders are servants. You have to take that servant role, and you take care of your people, the people that are taking care of you. And, I believe that a healthy employee is a happy employee, and a happy employee is a great teammate. And, so it goes back to, what you said a few minutes ago. If home is a wreck, it's really, really, really hard for people to be successful at work. And too many times that's the easy route. Focus all of our time and attention on work. Do you think that corporations are getting that by and large? And obviously you've got, you're going to have corporations on each end of that spectrum, but where do you feel like the workplace in America is right now? Do you think that we value what happens at home? Are we in a good place in that sense, or do you think that's something we really need to work on?
I think more organizations are becoming aware of some of these challenges, for sure. The latest numbers I saw show that a third of people are struggling with mental health, stress, depression, anxiety, some form or fashion. I'm not a mental health expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I would say a third of people don't have clinical issues there. I think a third of the people, or maybe, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but a bunch of people, I'll just say, are depressed and have anxiety and have stress that is mounting because of their relationships at home are not what they ought to be.
Yeah.
Does work play into that? Sure. But a lot of stuff outside of work. And then there's things that we do to, I was going back to what I said earlier about the technology. If we're not careful and we just stay on the screen all day long, is it any wonder that we're not, our serotonin levels and everything are, whacked out because of that? I mean, we're doing a lot of that to ourselves.
Sure.
And then we don't pay attention to the things that are life-giving. And if we're not careful, we're just we created a life that's sucking the life out of us. And so, I think more organizations are understanding that they've got to speak to the total person, try to help them with wellness, so to speak. Our physical fitness is a part of that. So many things that we do are a part of that. Do we hydrate? Do we sleep enough? All those kind of things. But our relationships, we know, and our society, or our social connections are a huge part of our wellness. And so I think the organizations that don't pay attention to that really just are hurting themselves. And it's I don't know that I've seen any numbers that tie together, but I do know that number is what it is. And then you got on the other hand, you've got the latest Barna numbers I saw. Only about a third of people are engaged at work. So what does that tell us? I mean, we got 2 out of 3 people that don't give a rip about what their leader cares about. And I mean, it's just, there's some low hanging fruit there for a company who understands this and starts to work on, the engagement level of their employees. And I think this what's going on at home is a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The name of my coaching company is True Wealth Coaching. Wealth is spelled WELLTH, health and wellness, body, soul, and spirit. And I think we have lost
Love that.
sight of the fact that we are whole people, that we are multifaceted, and that there are ways to be healthy. I, I think too often times we're chasing success when really what we need to be focusing on is health. I think, a healthy plant produces fruit. It just does. And I think if we can help people become healthy in all of these different areas of life, it makes a huge difference. And unfortunately, I think employers are going to have to be more aware of that, and some of them are. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Well, yeah, you make me think of the word integrity when you talk about that. I mean, I think this is a big deal, and we hear the word integrity and we think it means don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. That's actually, we don't want any of our employees to lie, cheat, and steal.
Right.
I got that. But when we think about integrity, it comes from our math word integer, which, if you know your math, an integer is a whole number. And so a person of integrity is a person of wholeness. It's exactly what you're talking about. They have an integrated life. We would all, if we think about it, are going, oh, that makes sense. Versus a person who doesn't have integrity, what are they? They are disintegrated or blown apart. They're disintegrated. Their life. And so what does that literally mean? Things may be good at work, but not so good at home. Or when I'm in public, I'm okay, but in private, not so much. Or I'm good with my wife, but my kids don't want to talk to me. Or things are great at home and things are not so great at work. I mean, but I think you can win in both places. And so I just think it begins at home. It begins outside of work. And if we can get that part right, then we got a chance to contribute in some extraordinary ways when we get to work.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're driving a car and 3 of the tires have perfect tire pressure, but one of them's blown out, you're going to have problems. So now
we just had an issue last night. We ran over a nail and one of our tires just began to leak, and I'm like, we filled it up, and this is not going to work. We got to go, and we had to have it repaired. And I think you're exactly right. There are places in our lives where we got one area of our life that's wobbling, and yet we think, there's no maintenance. That I don't have time for maintenance right now. I don't think you have time. Bad English, but you don't not have time for maintenance. You got to take care of this, or it's just, you're never going to get to where you want to go.
But it's hard. So let's get to the book. There's a few things I want to draw out and want to just kind of like get your response on. In chapter 8, Will asks John. Willie is he's the guide, the coach. Asks John, "What kind of family do you want?" And it's interesting that question strikes us because John's first response is, "Well, I want a good family." Okay, well,
Yeah.
you got to define that, buddy. Come on. Why do you think we have such a hard time defining what a good family or a healthy family looks like?
Well, let's back up half a step, and even the question itself. I've had so many people tell me, like, I just can't believe how simple that question is. What kind of family do you want? And I've never had even thought. I had a guy tell me last week, I've never even thought about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not even sure we have a target, so to speak. And so I think that is, I think it's such an easy question to neglect, and like, we just go through the motions, or we're supposed to have a family, and we don't, and then we wonder why we are where we are, the question to me was pretty simple, but I think it's a profound one if you've never asked yourself that question. I think when we start defining, what do we mean when we say a good family, or what do we mean when we say this kind of family? I think there's some things that you can begin to put in place that will help you target what you want. One of the things that I ask myself often is, how do I live my life in such a way that the people who know me the best actually love me the most? I think it's so easy for the people who know you the best to respect you the least. You can let your hair down with them. You can do what you want to with them. They're obligated to stay, kind of thing. We kind of make some assumptions there, and so it's real easy to not be authentic at home. But I think that question really pushes me personally to say, okay, how do I live in such a way that the people in my family really do know that I love them and they love me. They love being in my family, all my, we have 4 daughters, as I said, and my wife. There were 5 women in me when they were growing up, and I'm like, they will all tell you that I'm not the easiest guy to love at times, and so they've been really great sandpaper to, my rough edges through the years. But it's pretty cool when I look back and think, there's just opportunities to demonstrate. When we love somebody, we demonstrate it. You used the word a minute ago to be a servant leader. I think that's such a great way to look at your life. And when I say that, people often are like, well, that means you're the doormat, right? And that's not what I mean at all. I think the servant leader is willing to serve, yes, but they're also willing, if it best serves that other person, they're willing to hold them accountable and to tell them the truth and to be vulnerable and to challenge whatever. I mean, there's lots of different contexts for that, but it's basically, it's asking every day, what can I do to help the other person win? And I think the best picture, Mylan, of a servant leader that I think of, you asked me what sport I like. I like to watch football. There may be people who hate football who are listening, or you've got probably some football fans who are listening. If I ask anybody who's listening to think of a football player, I'm guessing the first person that would come to mind would be a quarterback, some quarterback for some team. Nobody's thinking about the left guard for the Rams or the right tackle for the Patriots. We wouldn't even know who those people are, most likely. Maybe they're in our family, but we're not thinking about them. And yet, all the good coaches I know will tell you that if you can't block them, you can't beat them. I mean, it starts by being able to control the line. All those quarterbacks we think of would be on their back if it weren't for those linemen who show up every day and open up a hole so somebody else can score.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way, as a family person, if you start thinking about how do you live this stuff out, if you show up every day so your ninth grader can win, if you show, and on those mundane days when it's another day of homework or another soccer practice or another tuition payment, whatever you have going on, you go into the grocery store again, you just have this mindset that you're going to help somebody else win. And by the way, they're not going to probably thank you. They're not going to notice, especially when they're young. They might someday, hopefully they'll come around, but you don't do it for that reason. That lineman doesn't do it to be recognized. They do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's just what they signed up for. And I think if our families were more like that, full of servant leaders, our culture would be so much better. There's an old golden rule from the Bible that says if we would just treat people the way we want to be treated. Mm-hmm. I mean, how good would it be? Not we treat people the way we expect them to treat us back, but we treat people the way we would want them to treat us back, whether they do or not. That's just what we do. Yeah. And I think if we were all guilty of that, personally, I think the world would get a lot better, no matter which way you vote. I mean, that to me would make things a lot better. Instead of yelling at each other and, all the divisiveness and we could get into all that. But bottom line is we each have a chance in our homes to show up and serve, and it's pretty cool when we do.
I love the sports illustrations because it shows that, that servant position, being willing to make a sacrifice for the others on the team leads to the big win, which everybody really wants. We want the Super Bowl. We don't necessarily want to just get our name over the loudspeaker on this play. We really want the Super Bowl. Well, in order to do that, everybody's got to do their part. And actually, you illustrated that really, really well in the book with the whole bunt concept, which I was going to say mentioned earlier. Yeah.
You mentioned my dad a minute ago teaching me to bunt. It was, I guess, mid 70s. I'm late 70s. I'm going to be 12 years old, and I'm the oldest in I'm playing Little League baseball. My dad was my coach, and so some of that was inspired through some of the story was inspired through a conversation we had. I got an aluminum bat for Christmas that year. I think they had just been invented, or at least had just gotten to our little small town. Probably had them a year or two before that, but these aluminum bats were going to revolutionize everything for me. I'm thinking this is going to be a lot easier now to hit some home runs. I was a little guy, and I'm having a hard time getting it to the fence. And this bats, I mean, we're playing in the backyard, my brother and I. The ball's flying all over the place. This is incredible. And so I'm pretty fired up about the season. And my dad comes to me that spring and he says, "Hey, we're going to actually teach you how to bunt." And I'm like, "Bunt? And have you lost your mind?" And Dad's like, "No, you need to. When we get guys on base, you're going to bunt and you're going to help them move up, so the next guy can get a hit. We can score more runs that way." And I'm like, "This is just insane. Why would we do that? I mean, I want to hit, and yet." We began to practice, and he taught me how to bunt, and what he was really teaching me was, he was teaching me about sacrifice. He was teaching me about someday you're going to have kids of your own, and you're going to have opportunities to be a friend and to help people and share with people and to be generous and all that stuff that I had no clue at the time and still struggle with today. It's not. I mean, this is no matter who's listening, how committed you are. It's always going to be easier, we think, to be selfish than it is to be selfless. And yet it always ends up being harder if we're selfish. We know that. I mean, we mess up our leadership, we mess up our influence, we mess up other people. The world would be so much better if we were serving as opposed to self-serving. But my dad was really teaching me that back then, and I just had no clue. So yeah, a little shout out to Dad. I wish he was still here, but he is here in so many ways. When I think back to the way he lived and things I'm still trying to do, to I guess make him proud, so to speak. I mean, I that may sound kind of crazy, but I want to make sure I pay forward what I've seen modeled in front of me, not just by him, but other people. That I mentioned Dan a minute ago, being generous. I mean, all these people who have invested in my life. I'm it's just not right for us to not try to help other people, and so that's what I believe.
Selfish teams are losing teams, and we see that. We see that in professional sports. We see that in college. We see that at every level. And for whatever reason, a lot of times we don't recognize the power of that in our own homes. And I want my family to be a winning team as far as families go. Of course, that goes back to, what do you want your family to look like, right? That's the vision. We've got to think through a vision. I loved what you said about being such a simple question. That was the first thing that hit me when I read it. I was like, yeah, that is way too easy, isn't it? But it's true. We have to get a vision for the kind of family we want. And then we have to answer, that's the what. And then the other thing we have to answer is why. Why do I want? Because at the end of the day, we're really motivated by our why, our intrinsic motivation. And we tease that out a little bit too, because you touch on that in the book as well.
Yeah, well, I think you used the word there, motivation. I think that's it. I mean, I want to know why do I want to, why do I want what I want?
Yeah.
And if I'm not careful, my motives may not be right. I want this just so everybody will think I'm, better than what I need. I mean, like, why do I care what everybody else thinks? Do I want this because I really want what's best for my kids, or I want what's best for me? Do I want to be impressive? I mean, like, all these things are not the motivations I want. But if I really understand that my motivation is noble and it's right, it is built on integrity, like, that integrated kind of mindset. To me, that when I get that right, and I don't always get that right, there's so many times where my motives are not right, they're not pure, they are selfish. And what I've noticed, again, I've been around for a while, what I've noticed is every time I'm selfish in the way I think, it never ends up being good for me. What I mean by that, lack of joy, lack of peace, stress, anxiety, all that stuff we talk about, that stuff comes, fear, when we are selfish, when we are selfless. To me, I've just found so much more joy and happiness and, love. I mean, all that stuff that we would all say we want. Where does that come from? It comes from, to me, living a life of love and having people around us who, are committed to the same things, that vision. And I think when we get that right, man, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. But when it's not right, like I said earlier, it can be really hard.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff that we really have to be willing to wrestle to the ground. But I think it oftentimes it just seems too hard or too out there. And we think we'll get to it someday. And but it has to be the foundation we build on, really. So another kind of aha moment for me was the part of the book near the very end where he talks about Willie talks about a speaker that came in and spoke to the team and talked about their value of controlling the controllables. That was one of the values of his team. And the speaker said, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but I don't think that's a very good value. What you need to do is dominate the things that you can control. So there was a shift in the way you kind of approached the controllables of life. Could you kind of unpack that a little bit for us? Because man, that was pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. So years ago, I had an opportunity to spend a few years working with the coaches from the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. I spent some time with their coaches and their players some, but mostly their coaches. And the very first time I got invited to go to spring training and speak to their coaches, there's about 80 of them in the room, from low A ball all the way up to their major league guys, and they're all there. And I'm going to talk to them. And I'm walking down the hallway on the way into this room where I'm going to be speaking to all these guys. And there's values are on the wall one at a time down, Pirate City there. And one of the values was to control the controllables. And so I see this as I'm walking in, and I thought, that I hear that all the time. People say, let's control the controllables. And I think that's a good way to think of it. I mean, I'm not,
it's not
raining
bad
on anybody's parade. It's not bad,
right.
But I'm like, okay, how would I reframe that if I was thinking about it? And so I walk in the room, and one of the first things I said was, so I'm the speaker here, that I'll kind of tip my hand a little bit in the book, but one of the things I said was, I think you guys need to do away with one of your values. And it really lets the air out of the room there. It's my first time there too, by the way. And I thought they were going to kick me out of camp because they were like, what are you talking about? And the guy who'd invited me was looking at me like, where are you going with this, dude?
Right.
And I said, you say out there you want to control the controllables. I said, I wouldn't challenge you to change that to dominate the controllables. And I said, if something's controllable, and let's think about what those are, Mylan. Our schedule is controllable. Our attitude is controllable. Our effort is controllable. Our belief is controllable. I mean, a lot of things we have control over a lot of things. There's so many things we don't have control of. It's like, we don't have control over the other teams. We don't have a control over which division we're in. If we're a baseball team, we don't have control over the schedule. There's a lot of stuff we have no control over. But the things we do have control over, what if we just committed every day to dominating those? And those are to be the places where we try to run up the score. And it really resonated with those guys as well. And I'm actually thinking about writing on this at some point in the future. But it's to me, it's a big idea that we would just be committed to dominating the controllables.
Yeah.
And if we would do that, I just think we're going to position ourselves to win, which is what we hopefully your leader. I mean, your listeners are committed to winning, or they wouldn't be listening. I mean, they're not, they're not just winging it and hoping that, things will change.
Yeah.
They really want to make a difference. And I'm the same way. And so I think if we could dominate those things that we have control over, those will be the places where we really try to run the score. Let the other stuff just take care of itself. And that's worked for me. And so I would encourage people listening to make a list of the things that you can control and really try to do your very best in those areas. And the things you can't control, you might make a list of those as well. I think if you start asking yourself, how much energy am I putting on this side of the list versus that? There's a lot of people who are putting a lot of emphasis on the things they can't control. And then for me, if I'm not careful, let's just take our attitude as one example. If I've got my circumstances on one side and I'm on the other, and now I'm battling my circumstances. If I'm not careful, I will let my attitude go over here and join my circumstances. And now I'm battling my circumstances and my emotions. And it's exhausting if we're doing that. We get negative and critical, and I think it's really hard to go to a positive place with negative people. And so let's stay in that positive place. And not only that, let's really try to be even more positive than what seems normal. I mean, I think that sense of belief is a big deal. So yeah, I always tell people, let's dominate the controls.
I love that. And I'm actually glad you told that story, because that was one of the questions I had in my mind. I was wondering, Was that really a John Maxwell moment? Was there a point where, he heard that from John Maxwell or, whatever, but that was you, man. That's awesome. And did the Pirates
I don't have a lot of but and my original stuff's pretty simple, but that was
that
me.
was a good one, man. That's a dinger. And did the Pirates
Yeah.
change
I will
that?
say this, in wrestling as well, there, when I finished, the GM for the team was there, and he stood up at the end and really affirmed that. He said, "That is maybe the best thing I've heard since we've been in camp the last couple of weeks." And he said, that's what we need to focus on. And they made that an emphasis. And they had a great year, obviously, back then. It was really cool. But
So have you walked
yeah,
back through that hallway? Is it different?
all right. But I just, I just one of the things I noticed, and I thought, okay, there's sometimes we can reframe things. It's, just the way we think about it.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time. I still have like 10 questions, and you saw the questions when I sent them to you. I think you were also aware that there was no way we were going to cover all of that. And man, I really, really appreciate what you shared today. You mentioned the activation guide though. One of the things I was like, okay, so John and Kristen are just at the end of the book. They're, just starting their coaching with Willie and Karen. And it's like, well, we got to have a sequel. How are they going to coach them? What are they going to? And that's where the guide comes in. So, could you just talk briefly about that and the value of that and what you offer in that?
Yeah, I would say, to me, that is maybe the most important part, is to have some people around you who can give you outside perspective, who can coach you, who can help you. I always say hope is not a strategy. I hope our marriage will get better, or maybe she'll change, or maybe something will be different. I mean, that I love hope as much as the next guy, but you behave your way to where you want to go.
Yeah.
You really do. And I believe a coach, a person who can invest in you and encourage you and ask you those hard questions and keep you on track. Think about all the best athletes in the world. Think about, the Olympics are coming up, and they've all got a coach. He's the best of the best. They got a coach. Think about the best musicians. They have a teacher. Think about the best. You pick any area, best business people I know, they have coaches that help them. And so I would say, for your audience, if people are looking for a coach, they should call you. I know you're coaching and you're available to help them. I'll give a plug. I'm a big believer in having somebody who can just have a fresh set of eyes. But I also think when coaching is done well, it gets uncomfortable. I've got somebody that's actually pushing me and trying to help me get to a better place. They're trying to help me win. They're that offensive lineman mindset, but they're also going to, it may get ugly at times where they, like, you said, you're going to do this. You said you're committed to this. Tell me what's up. And then you're going, man, it's the accountability. It's the power of accountability. Yep. So I'm a big believer in that, but that's when we put the activation guide in there. I thought it was important for people to have something to do. I think the book personally is an easy read. Is it inspiring? I think so. I think it's, it's good. I think we all can relate to a lot of the stuff in the book. If you read it, you'll be able to relate to different characters at different times in your life, different seasons. But I think beyond, a fun couple of hour read, I'm more concerned what's happening 30 days later. And to me, that activation guide is giving you a step-by-step process to build the family that you want. And so I couldn't find anything out there to help me think about that stuff. And this is not the end all be all when it comes to that, but I think it'll definitely put people in the right direction and help them make progress.
Yeah, I love that the book is so approachable. The activation guide gives simple steps, yet very, very powerful steps to help people in an area that I think is the most important area of our lives. Like you say, if we win everywhere else but lose at home, we've lost. And the next generation, our children, our families, all of those things are way too important to let go to chance. So, well, I want to just wrap up real quick. I want to ask you, is there anything else, maybe because I didn't ask the right questions or whatever, anything else you wanted to cover, anything we missed today?
You didn't miss it, but I will say this. I didn't mention it. We did create a course to go with the book, and really all of our leadership content is available at leadeverydayacademy.com. And so all that stuff is there. And that course we put inside of our business content as well. I think we've got 7 courses in there now for a person that has a subscription to that. So that would be helpful. People can get that. And then I just encourage people to go check out the book. I mean, I think it'll be something that could really help, maybe even transform, their situation. I've had people already telling me that it's been pretty catalytic in the way they think about their life and their family life. And so hopefully that will be an encouragement. If they want to get buy bulk, I mentioned that. I mean, then get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and everywhere. But if you want to get it bulk copies for your employees or whatever, just go to winningbeginsathome.com and that we've got it priced a little better there for you. So you can check that out if that will be helpful to you.
Excellent. And we will have all that information in the show notes or the description of the video, and so that you can connect with all of that. And it might even be worth it for you to. I downloaded the Audible. It was while I was at work. I was listening to it. Loved it in that format as well. Even if you've got a good marriage, maybe you want to do that, and it would it would give you some insights. There's probably people in your life, family or friends, that that could really use that. And it's not one of those overbearing, heavy. It would be a welcome gift if you were to share that with somebody else that you care about. So
I can't tell you how many people have told me they've read it and they want to give it. They know who they're going to give it to, a younger person or family. It's I think you're exactly right. I think that'd be awesome.
Well, Randy, I've taken enough of your time today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your energy. I love the book. I really encourage anybody who's just thinking about it, maybe get it. And also look up the other resources that Randy's part of with his leadership training and all of that. So thank you so much. Again, God bless. And maybe we'll have to do this again sometime.
Thanks, Myron. I appreciate it. Thanks for all you do, man.
All right. Take care, man. Bye-bye. Hey, I hope this episode has been a huge inspiration and help and encouragement for you. Don't forget to go into the show notes or the description below the video on YouTube and look for the links to Randy's other works. Winning Begins at Home, his company, Lead Every Day. And he even has his own podcast, and you can follow him there. And I just want to say a special thanks to Randy for being willing to give us your time and your energy today, and for continuing to encourage leaders to really lead well at home. I hope you as a listener will be able to do the same as well. And as we're all trying to figure out how to navigate midlife and just be the best version of us that we can be. Want to encourage you also to subscribe, if you haven't yet, to this podcast, either on YouTube or in Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast. And want to encourage you to just keep tuning in. We're going to continue to interview interesting people with powerful stories as we all are working together to navigate midlife and create a strategy for a winning second half. I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless.